Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine did not go as planned by Putin. This caused the longer coldness. Neither Putin's Ukrainian wars getting worse than bad. Russian invaders are defeated with successful attacks on the front lines of Ukrainian armed forces. Russian soldiers who cannot achieve the desired success in the front lines are experiencing a loss of morale and motivation. We left a year behind in the Ukrainian war. Considering the conflict in a year, it is possible to see that the failures of the Russian army have reached huge dimensions. During this time, the Ukrainian armed forces had a hard time on the occupying troops on the decade lines, with the courageous stance shoving the armed forces. A series of achievements on the front line of Ukraine pumps motivation to Kiev troops. The motivation of the Ukrainian soldiers often announce their name with cross-border operate. The drone army of Ukraine and unmanned weeks have been over and over to the cities of Russia many times. Which javelin in Russian skies have also horrified the Kremlin administration, especially Russian civilians. Now let's look at Kiev's attacks that terrified Kremlin from a wider perspective. Together, today's are very active in Bryansk, one of the most important cities of Russia. The situation in Bryansk worsened. Last week, Russia accused the Ukraine of conducting a cross-border attack in Burin. Moscow claimed that the Ukrainians crossed the border, opened fire died and a child was injured and hosting hostages in a shop. Russian Putin described the entry of Ukrainian saboteurs in Russian territory as a terrorist attack. Opinions were devoted to whether this was a false attack or a real attack by Ukrainian group. However, a video of the alleged attack on Russia was published on the internet. The video is claimed to have been published on the internet by Russian volunteer troops claiming to be behind the task. This is a unit of the Ukrainian Regional Defense, founded by Russian right-wing volunteers who fought for Ukraine in the procession and some other units. It is not yet known whether the group will move on its own or in coordination with. Meanwhile, the Ukraine denied that it was involved in the occupied Russian territory. Ukrainian President Mikhail Podolyak, advisor to the President, said that this is only a deliberate provocation for Russia. In addition, Podolyak said that with these attacks, the Russian Federation wanted to intimidate its own people and justify the attack on the other country with a staged attack. Perrin is becoming the target point of Ukrainian attacks while Putin's viability of terrorism charges. The new attack discussions that took place here are thoroughly flaming. Last stage, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense Special Intelligence Unit, Kraken, announced that they destroyed the INA autonomous surveillance TAVR in Russia's SCR using the drone. The Kraken unit reported the Ukrainian military intelligence released a video that he said he had shown the attack on the Telegram. The timing of the attack was not clear. However, the video arrived days after a short-term armed attack on the Russian border village in Bryansk by a group claiming to have fought for Ukraine. Rarely known in Russia, the Russian headquarters, an observation tower flew up with the unmanned aerial weak attack organized by the Kraken regiment. The Kremlin management has not yet made an official statement about the incident. Casual losses still remain uncertain. What we know about the Kraken Battalion, which has made a sound explosion in Burin. Let's analyze the Kraken Battalion together. Kraken is a distinguished unit of the Ukrainian Defense Forces established shortly after the start of the Russian occupation, especially in the Kharkiv region of Ukraine. It has been involved in important operations against Russian forces. During the conflict, they successfully rescued several occupied villages. Kra and Dust became one of the highest-profile volunteer units in the war. The special unit operates in a kind of gray area. The Kraken Battalion is not directly connected to the Ministry of Defense, but is not part of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. His story begins long before his original establishment. 6 months before Russia launched a military attack on Ukraine, the troops of the future unit already knew that the war was approaching. Defense intelligence officers and AZA regiment veterans launched courses for those who volunteered to military training, and 3,000 trainees went through these courses. These activities later helped rapidly gather personnel to create a new unit in February when the war broke out. Kraken is a discovery and sabotage unit due to its purpose. This union has recently managed to make a name for him. What is defeats to the Russian army? We see that Kraken Special Military Units hub become a nightmare for Moscow soldiers. For example, in January, the Washington convoy destroyed a strategic transition point, Luhan, in the Kraken Special Operations. For example, the video images shared on Telegram and Twitter showed how the Ukrainian forces continued to use the weapons provided by the West to destroy Russian tanks, and that Moscow worst the serious, modern armed vehicle in a video as a result of the operation of Ukrainian Kraken Special Unit. Luhansk serious damage to Russian tanks and destroyed the BTR and armed personnel carrier. On the other hand, Russia and Ukraine shares a land border extending more than 1931 kilometers, including several hundred miles in eastern Donetsk region. Some are which is controlled by MAS. Russia used regions close to Ukraine to organize attacks, rocket-start air attacks, and organize other attacks during the war. These regions include by and along the northern border of Ukraine. Authorities in Kiev, Ukraine, towns and cities, which they claim to be used to attack the targets in Russia, which they claim to have reserved. However, the alliance promised that they would not use the weapons provided by the Western allies for such attacks because they feared that Moscow could see it as an attack. During the year of war, explosions and fires were reported in oil warehouses in Russia, railway centers, and other military targets. However, Ukraine maintained a deliberate policy of uncertainty against such attacks and rarely assumed responsibility. It is believed that Ukraine has shot several times in Russia, including December when the NGS airbase about 482 kilometers away from the Ukrainian border has been attacked twice. The Ukrainian armed forces took at least 3 rockets into Belgorod region. The governor of Russia's Belgrade region on the Ukrainian border claimed that Russian air defense systems have dropped these rockets in Novi Osko. However, as a result of one of the rockets' explosion, at least one person was injured in this arm. In addition, as a result of the attack, electrical lines and large number of houses were known to be damaged. For now, no more serious damage has been detected. Ukraine's cross-border operations are not interrupted. The Ukrainian army attacked Russian headquarters on the territory of Katoki region of Kursk region. It is currently known that the territory of Katoki region has been exposed to intense fire. The Kremlin management chose to remain silent the van details of the attack. In another development, the Ukrainian government expressed his increasing concern that Moscow was using the Bryansk region to start unmanned weak attacks. The Kiev administration announced that the last attack took place before the dawn to other day. While the air defense weapons echoed alarms rang in Kiev, Ukraine Air Force claimed that it had detected at least 15 non-menial vehicles from Burin and has reduced 13. In addition, Kiev forces continued to target Russian castles in the occupied regions of Ukraine. The city's exile mayor Ivan Fed said that to the national television, and last night, 2 major explosions occurred in the city of Melitopol under the Russian occupation of Ukraine. Mr. Fed said that the Ukrainian army is still trying to verify the damage caused by the attack. As a result, no end of the relentless war has not yet appeared. It is only a matter of time before the Ukrainian war splashes Russian cities. We will wait and see if the successful cross-border operations of Kiev military units and Kraken Battalion will change the direction of. Next news. In the first days of the war, no one predicted that the effects of Putin's war in Ukraine on February 24, 2023 would reach completely different dimensions. Putin was mistaken in thinking that he would end this war quickly. More than a year has passed since the beginning of the war, and now the hell that Putin created has spread to Russian soil. Ukraine has now begun to avenge the Russian invasion. In addition to the soldiers of the Ukrainian armed forces who crushed the Russian army on the front, the Ukrainians began to target Russian lands as well. In particular, they started to hunt critical areas that are likely to attack Ukraine. Especially in the last day, the Russian military airport in Yaz settlement showed us that a very critical operation can be carried out after the attack with unmanned aerial vehicles. It was observed that the Russian Su-34 warplanes with a high potential to attack Ukraine suddenly disappeared. Let's examine the details and possible consequences of this attack together. Ukraine has reportedly hit a major Russian air base in Yaz after massive explosions in the area. In another attack behind the Moscow front, it was announced that the Russian military air base, where the airstrikes in Ukraine were carried out, was hit by the Ukrainian long-range Tu-141 STR unmanned aerial vehicle. Ukrainian sources also claimed responsibility for the attack on the military airport in the CRO's Nadar, and a photo has emerged that points to the explosion. Residents assume that there may even be missile missiles hitting their airspace. Russian officials denied the strike, but local residents reported 2 loud explosions. We know that the Kremlin constantly denies these attacks. Even if this is a strategic move, the shadow of a regular attack is clearly visible. The Kremlin cannot hide. Then black smoke rose from the airport, which was the base for attack planes used against Ukraine in Vladimir Putin's war. According to preliminary data, the Tu-141 Swift UAV was shot down. The base area was attacked, but none of the Russian warplanes were damaged in the attack. However, this attack is unlikely to be the only one. Trials will likely continue. Russian officials could not agree on the cause of the explosion in Yaz on the coast of the Sea of Azov. However, we think that the purpose of the attack is very clear because when we look at the location of Yaz, Mariupol is located on the opposite shore. Considering the critical purpose of the Azov Sea, the attacks on Yaz would actually break the Crimean defense. The Russian-Crimean connection in the Black Sea seems to be about to be broken. If the connection between the Sea of Ov and Crimea is also severed, severed, Crimea will be completely defense. So how is Ukraine's attack on Yaz possible? Because even if it is said that this is an unmanned aerial vehicle attack in the published report, interesting reports are also shared that there are missile attacks at similar distances. Before we talk about these, we need to talk a little bit about the disappeared Russian Su-34 seconds among the Russian warplanes stationed in Yaz, where Sukhoi Su-34 bombers. It is known that 6 Su-34 fighter bombers, which had been here for a very long time, disappeared somewhere in the military. Airspace attacks were also reported in Belgorod, Tusa, and the Republic of While Russian President Putin ordered increased protection at the border, another came within 60 miles of Moscow and pointed to breaches in the Russian air. Defense authorities claim that the drones did not cause any injuries or cause significant damage. But Monday night and Tuesday morning attacks have raised questions about Russian defensive capabilities more than a year after the country's full-scale invasion of it. Ukrainian officials did not immediately take responsibility, but similarly refrained from directly accepting responsibility for past attacks and sabotage while emphasizing Ukraine's right to strike any target in Russia. While Putin did not refer to a specific attack in his speech in the Russian capital, his comments came hours after drones targeted various areas in Russia, south and west, and authorities closed the airspace over St. Peter. Let's come to the missile potentials of these strange attacks. Ukraine now seems to have the potential to hit Russian targets from very long ranges. This is where things get interesting. Reaching back a little more will open different windows for us. Much remains unclear about what caused a series of explosions in recent months that tore apart Russia's Saki airbase near the village of Novofedor. Rivka on the Crimean P. Russia claimed that what happened was an accident, and that the damage was minimal and did not result in loss of life. However, the Russian authorities presented no concrete evidence to prove this and ordered the evacuation of the surrounding areas. Some Ukrainian officials claimed it was an attack, while others said it was carried out using a locally developed unspecified evasion. If there were indeed a cold airstrike from outside of Crimea, it would have to involve a weapon that Ukraine does not officially possess, but has certainly been close to in recent years. Viktor Andrus, who resigned from his position as the advisor to the country's interior minister for unclear reasons, in July claimed in a post on Telegram that Ukraine's missile isles with a range of between 200 and 500 kilometers are in service. This may justify some of the claims of local residents in the attack at Yaz airport. Ukraine has previously demonstrated that it has Grim-2 short-range ballistic missiles with a range of 200 to 500 kilometers. Andrus had previously called for long-range attacks on the Kerch Strait Bridge, which connects Russia with occupied Crimea. There was indeed an attack on the Kerch Bridge, but not with long-range missile. We'll see Ukraine's claims, which include the use of some form of self-developed weapon, are ultimately substantiated. Ukrainian forces will need a ground-based weapon system with a kind of range Andrus mentioned to hit Psyche from the areas they control in the southeastern tip of the country. However, explosions at the base could have been caused by manned aircraft, drones of varying complexity, short-range missiles covertly launched from within or from the coast of Crimea, attacks by sabotage, or a simple accident. Regardless, evidence has certainly grown that Russia's initial claims about how limited the destruction from the explosions were was a lie. Whatever happened at Psyche airbase, especially in light of Andrei's post, raised an important question. Where are Ukraine's locally developed, short-range ballistic missiles? This is where the answer to the question we are looking for comes in. It can be difficult to pinpoint precise detail, but what is undeniable is that Ukrainian rocket and missile company DEN, also known as the Yuzhnoye Design Office, is at some level working on a short-range ballistic missile designed to be fired from the road. The roots of this project reportedly go back to the end of the Cold War and Ukraine's independence from the Soviet Union. This separation spurred the desire to produce a locally developed successor to the Taka-U short-range ballistic missile that would be roughly equivalent to Russia's Iskander-M. The missile and the entire weapon system of which it is a part have been referred to as SOPs on GRM Grim-2 and Krim-2 over the stops on seems to be the name applied to a larger effort under which this weapon and other components of the entire system were developed, including a 10-wheeled TEL that can be loaded with 2 containerized missiles simultaneously. The terminology of GROM variant seems to refer to versions of missile isles or systems that appear to be domestic and export-specific variations. Pictures of solid propellant rocket engines associated with the Grim-2 design have surfaced in the past, but there don't seem to be any pictures of prototype or production examples of the full weapon. The model with the name GROM on the side which was publicly displayed in 2000, showed a design similar to Russia's Alexander M. At least on the outside in wide strokes, these missile isles stand out as a great revolution in the history of Ukraine. This may be one of the formulas that can change the war. Together with the missile isles in the hands of Ukraine, it can completely take the war to another dimension. By destroying strategic Russian targets bombing Ukraine, it could make an invasion of Ukraine completely. In fact, if the Ukrainian armed forces use this potential, they can recreate a completely free Ukraine.